Welcome back to another exciting but yet condensed version. Condensed, like that taste, the sweet, tasty milk, the condensed milk. Same thing. American Hot Rod Association, AHRA, Drag Racing History Channel, condensed version.
Why is this a condensed version? Everybody wants these like long, rambling dissertations that we've done so far.
We're working on the longest, most rambling, completely off-topic dissertation that everyone has been waiting for.
So what happened was we wanted to do funny cars. Okay, next, because we did Top Fuel and we did gassers. So the next logical step is funny car. And then we started looking at, what constitutes funny car. I mean, it's pretty straightforward if you go from like 1967 through today. All right, it's all pretty much there. But
what leads up to the funny? Because it didn't just appear out of nowhere.
Right. It was a frenzy. So we're talking about a period of evolution that lasted from 1962, ballpark, to 1966, like a 4-year period where literally all hell broke loose. And so many things were happening in so many different venues, right? NHRA, AHRA, and then all of these independent circuits and match race circuits and the match bash
outlaw tracks and match racing and
it was a free for all. It was amazing. It was actually very much like what you see happening today with the no prep
and the pro mod stuff. Pro mod went that way for about 5-year period.
Pro mod was interesting when it first came out. I remember very, very distinctly in like 1987, I guess it was. It was new, it was interesting, it was innovative, and it kind of reminded me of what the Match Bash days must have been like.
Right.
But not really, because it was still, even though the early pro mods, you had supercharged cars, turbocharged cars, nitrous cars, NA cars, you had that mix. They were still kind of like formulaic, more or less.
Right, you had the smattering of, was Nitro Coops in there? Was Nitro Coops
Nitro Coops for a little while, 20% Nitro. Bill Coleman, I remember trying to help Bill Coleman over the phone with a tune-up on that thing. It was just like, it was a nightmare. I felt bad. He had like just crates of like burnt up pistons.
Oh, jeez.
So, but at any rate, Pro Mod is formulaic. Right, meaning that they all have the same basic kind of chassis. The aerodynamics have all been sorted. You know what I mean? It's like there's no great mysteries involved.
This was the very beginning where you had to figure it all out. As you're bolting the part on your car, if you didn't race it the weekend before, you're already behind the curve.
Right, and this was a period of time where people discovered that at 160 miles an hour, cars take off like
through the air.
Right, they just fly. Right, so. And they were going 160 miles an hour long before the machinery was capable of going 160 miles an hour.
I like to refer to this era as like the Area 51 of drag racing, right? It is literally the oddest, most interesting, and as the deeper you peel the onion, the more insane it gets, right? So we're talking about factory experimental.
Well, factory experimental was the first step towards all of this stuff. And there's so much misconception as to what factory experimental was. People think factory experimental was born as, quote, the funny car. Right. They picture the altered wheelbase cars and everything else. But factory experimental actually started off as a pretty tame idea. It wasn't that big of a deal.
Right.
So it began in 1962.
Well, the 61 is where the idea started swirling around. Okay. And then 62 was the first year it was actually implemented by any sanctioning body. Right.
So the premise behind factory experimental was in Superstock, which was like the top dog class of the day. In Superstock, a manufacturer had to produce 50 of a certain car in order to make it eligible for competition. This created some situations because some combinations just were not assembly line doable.
Right, well the big one was, you had like Dino Don in 61 had a 409, it would have been essentially a ringer Impala.
Okay, right.
He wins like the last race of the year and gets disqualified, right? Because there wasn't any of these cars made. And so, you're out of here. Well, no, it literally was a GM offering, but it had to be the, hey, what you doing?
Right.
They
also, the Z11 car.
Right. So they also found out that if you had your essentially your race on Sunday, sell on Monday. Well, they realized that the closer the factory could get up to this thing, you'd have race on Sunday, selling even more on Sunday, right? So,
factory experimental class, the A, B, and C factory experimental, there were three divisions within, was where the manufacturer didn't have to produce 50 of a certain car. They only had to produce one. So if the factory wanted to put, like the Pontiac, if they wanted to put a 421 in a Tempest and go, they could. The Chevy Nova, the Fuelie Nova in '62 was like the hitter car. So they took the fuel-injected motor out of the Corvette, the 327, and they stuck it in a four-door Nova.
It was either four-door or wagon. It was generally the ones that they did it for. And I actually have numbers, but it's not really necessary. What it was the weight that was desired, right? So the four-door car actually had more weight and it had a different offset.
Better weight distribution.
Right. So when they did the 327, they could have put a 409 in there because it had to be just factory parts. But when they did the 327 in the Nova, they found out that the weight bias on it was not, if you would have had the big block, it'd been 65 and 35. So this one was like almost 50-50 setup, right? So much closer to 50-50.
Closer to 50-50.
Yeah.
The original factory experimental rules were basically super stockers with whatever engine the factory produced and could stick in there. And it was pretty tame the first year. It was straightforward. 63 things started to get a little more intense.
Right. The Pontiac Tempest no longer was the one-man show where it was Mickey Thompson. It was actually 63. Pontiac they built their own Tempests. Mm-hmm. And then they took the rope drive out of them and they put a solid rear axle in them. And it started getting really hairy, right? Because, I mean, everybody knew that those cars were rope drive and that's what they were using to begin with.
Right. Now, since General Motors could re-engineer their platform in that respect, and engine setback was a little bit different. See, in Superstock, they didn't allow any engine setback at all. But when you start taking engines that aren't intended to be in certain bodies...
What's the setback?
What's the setback? Right, exactly. So things started to get a little liberal. And Chrysler decided at that point, well, you know what, if General Motors can reconfigure their Tempest, take the rope drive out, put a regular... Well, then we can move our chassis, our body around, the unibody around on the axles. And they came up with the 2% cars, which was the Hemi cars, A864 Hemi cars, but with the wheelbase moved 2% to increase the weight bias. So, but anyway, but that's getting into like the nuts and bolts. We don't want to go there yet because, well,
we have to. I think to do the whole project justice, we need to lead up to the funny car era. Right. You can't just jump right into funny car because you're going to leave out a big piece. Because this developed so fast. These cars were literally, when they started like 62, you're looking at 1050s or, no, I'm sorry, 12 seconds at like 110 miles an hour. And then by the time it ended, you're looking at 65, because going into the 66 year, it was pretty much done. It was all over with.
By 65,
you're down in the eights at 170.
Right.
So it went and evolved so fast that it was a whirlwind.
So there were so many different designations. Now the official designation, as far as the sanctioning bodies went, were just A, B, and C factory experimental, and it was just a weight to cubic inch.
Exactly, and it was like A went up to like 8.99, and then 9 to 12.99, and then 13 and above, and that was it. It was a basic simple.
But by 1963, because the country had become so FX like conscious, and people were just like, this was interesting stuff. This was like this was the magazines of the day consisted of all FX stuff. The track promoters, the racers, the more innovative and outlaw types just started making up their own stuff as they went along. It didn't hurt.
You had some of the biggest names in Superstock jumping in there, right? And then you had the factory pushing this, because you had the power of not just the big three, but it would be almost any automotive manufacturer in the United States at that time, right? Pushing this And they had the money, the leverage, to make it happen. And then you had the sanctioning bodies pushing it as well. So it was like everybody was catapulting this class to the forefront.
But that was, like I said, that was the official designation, or the official classes, which is the A, B, and C.
Right.
But then you had SFX pop up.
Yeah,
Right?
supercharged.
Supercharged factor experimental, which they just made it up.
That
right?
was not allowed, yeah.
Right, just here, paint SFX on your car and go for it, right? There was OFX, or outlaw factor experimental. There was
UFX.
Right, so it was just anything went, and it was just like, you just paint the designation on your car and go.
Matter of fact, like shortly after the UFX, there just wasn't even a designator anymore at all.
Right.
Like it just completely disappeared,
Right.
and you just
I think Arnie Beswick, I would say if you had to pick one like seminal character.
Oh,
right?
Arnie played a big part on this whole thing.
Right. Well, the Tameless Tiger there, you
Right.
know, the Tempest, the blown Nitro Tempest.
It's that car. The picture of it almost completely embodies the FX class because it's literally like an early Tempest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's went through every piece of evolution in the FX class on that same car. It's got an altered wheelbase.
In like 3 months.
Right. It's got an altered wheelbase, and it's like a nitro breathing, supercharged Pontiac with an automatic in it.
Right. And at the same, well, when you say they dropped the designations, because then you had like the Saxon Sons car, which a lot of people credit as being the first, quote, funny car. In 1964.
Right.
So there's so many different angles and so many different perspectives on what was the first and what set all of this off. Even just talking now, like, so we're doing just a quick video. It's supposed to be just doing a quick video.
Yeah, it was probably
and we've
10
already
minutes.
run off into like 40 different directions, which goes to show you just how intense this period of evolution was. These were crazy times. There was even the Dodge Chargers, and they weren't actually Chargers. These were 63 B-body cars that Chrysler sent out there with blown wedges, like just regular wedges on gasoline, and they fell into that whole FX,
Right.
supercharged FX.
SFX.
Right, yeah, exactly. So this is a teaser. I think this is a teaser.
Yeah, it leads up to what we were really trying to drive towards, but we couldn't miss this period because it's what defines how the beginning of the funny car happens, right?
Right. So now I know funny cars from my era in that world, but and I know them just from what I've read about in the magazines. I'm not really a historian, right? But we do have a historian in our midst.
We do.
Right.
Yeah, we got Steve Magnante.
Right, Hemi Magneto.
Right, he's going to come and straighten us out.
Steve knows these cars, this period of history. He's a scholar of it, and so he can give the exact, this person did this, blah, 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 and tie all of those chains together. And that'll be our next video.
Right, yep.
Steve is going to join us, and we're going to talk about the specifics, that evolutionary step between factory experimental, let's just put some non-assembly line engines in our cars, to blown nitro hell, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Steve will run through all of that, and that'll be our next installment here on the AHRA Drag Racing History Channel.
Yep, that's correct. So
Right.
here's your condensed version. We'll see you in a few days.
I feel guilty we did a teaser.
Yeah.
People are going to be like,
Whoa, hold
where's
on.
the meat?
I'm waiting for you guys to just ramble on for 2.5 hours. I need a diatribe about
Right.
flip-top funny cars and escape doors.
Yeah. Once it gets to flip-top cars, I'll take over. Okay?
All right.
But we need Steve for this evolutionary.
Well, until then, we'll see you at the next one.
That's it?
Yeah, well, how about we'll see you at the funny car after you buy some merchandise. Or no? I'm going to have to edit all this out.
What a terrible merch pitch. But that's okay. That's it. So we'll see you guys in the next one.
See you later.